Are we watching the end of a civilization? No, I don't mean Iran's and the rantings of a madman who's on the precipice of either being removed under the 25th Amendment or being impeached and removed, including people in Congress who are Republicans. No, I mean the end of our civilization in the hands of Donald Trump. What happened to our republic, our democracy, our values? That's who Donald Trump is crapping on. It's not just dropping the F-bomb and worse on the Iranian people. I thought we were supposed to be liberating them. I thought we were supposed to be making sure that 90 million people don't all become the enemy of the United States. I thought that's why Iranian Americans were dancing in the streets on February the 28th when Donald Trump went into Iran. Well, they're not dancing in the streets any longer. They're crying and they're worried, as are people in Tehran and in other places, because Donald Trump, as we're coming on the air, has threatened to annihilate an entire people. And if you think that is a genocidal threat, that is a war crime, then ding, 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 you would be right. And now you've got 24 and growing number of Congress who are Democrats who are calling for impeachment proceedings immediately to start against Donald Trump. You've got no one in the MAGA and the Republican Party doing a thing about it. They're all still on vacation, not holding any hearings, forgetting what their Article 1 powers are over a president who is waging war without check and balance and without oversight. And this is exactly the moment in time that was predicted by the 6 members of Congress, led by Senators Mark Kelly and Alyssa Slotkin, who were former members of the CIA and or the military, who said there will come a moment, members of the military up and down the chain of command, when you will be given an illegal, unconstitutional order. You cannot follow it. Don't give up the ship. Instead, you must uphold the constitutional oath that you took, not to support a madman, a war criminal in the making, but to defend our democracy and our rule of law, or you will violate the Code of Military Justice, the Geneva Convention, and more. And this is the moment that Alyssa Slotkin, didn't want to arrive, but it is here. And so there were many, many reactions to Donald Trump's threats of genocide against the Iranian people tonight. You had Marjorie Taylor Greene joining with AOC, both saying almost exactly the same thing, singing out of the same hymnal about it's time for impeachment. J.D. Vance, who has to lead the impeachment proceeding, he can trigger it, and then a majority of the cabinet. But remember, Donald Trump created on purpose this time around a 25th Amendment proof cabinet. You think he put in people that he thought he'd have to worry about, like he did in his first administration? Adults, patriots that would do the right thing to protect our democracy? No. He put in a bunch of puppets, crash test dummies, and the rest who would never think to go against the president and to invoke the 25th Amendment. But here we are. In fact, I found it. You're on the intersection, by the way, for those that are like, who is this guy? Yeah, I'm Michael Popok. You're on the Midas Touch Network. Lots to talk about today. Got my special guest. We'll bring him in a bit. Scott McFarlane, the new DC bureau chief from Midas Touch. Got Midas news, like reporting on ourselves, which is fantastic. Let's focus on this genocidal rant. Many believe that this is yet another sign of mental instability, the middles of dementia. What else would you call it? Who's writing these things for him? Who's approving these things for him? The Office of Legal Counsel? His Department of Justice? The lawyers in the Pentagon? No, he's doing it. And so when several months ago, Alyssa Slotkin and the other 5, which Donald Trump said should be hanged from the highest limb, and George Washington would do it, when they put out this video, who knew how quickly they would be right and we would be at that moment? And we are now, as Alyssa Slotkin said today, we are at that moment. Let's play that video for people to remember.
I'm Senator Alyssa Slotkin.
Senator Mark Kelly.
Representative Chris Deluzio.
Congresswoman Maggie Goodlander.
Representative Chrissy Houlihan.
Congressman Jason Crow.
I was a captain in the United States Navy.
Former CIA officer.
Former Navy.
Former paratrooper and Army Ranger.
Former intelligence officer.
Former Air Force.
We want to speak directly to members of the military
and the intelligence community
who take risks each day
to keep Americans safe.
We know you are under enormous stress and pressure right now.
Americans trust their military.
But that trust is at risk.
This administration is pitting our uniformed military
and intelligence community professionals
against American citizens.
Like us. You all swore an oath
to protect and defend this Constitution.
Right now, the threats to our Constitution aren't just coming from abroad,
but from right here at home.
Our laws are clear. You can refuse illegal orders.
You can refuse illegal orders.
You must refuse illegal orders.
No one has to carry out orders that violate the law
or our Constitution.
We know this is hard
and that it's a difficult time to be a public servant.
But whether you're serving in the CIA,
the Army,
or Navy,
the Air Force,
your vigilance is critical.
And know that we have your back.
Because now, more than ever,
the American people need you.
We need you to stand up for our laws,
our Constitution,
and who we are as Americans. Don't give up.
Don't give up.
Don't give up.
Don't give up the ship.
Put a chill down my spine. That was several months ago. And Jeanine Pirro, we'll talk a lot about the Department of Justice tonight, especially when Scott joins. And Jeanine Pirro, Donald Trump's, tireless political hack of a U.S. attorney in the D.C. office, went about whatever Donald Trump told her to do. Try to prosecute those 6, and a grand jury in D.C. said, no, we're not doing that, okay? And now, look how prescient that call to arms was, to remind people in military up and down the chain of command that they have swore their own oath, and it violates things like the Nuremberg Principle and other aspects of military justice for people in the military to follow Donald Trump's lead and to annihilate and wipe out a civilization. And the fact that those words would even come out of Donald Trump's mouth or social media posting is enough for any other individual to be removed from office. He is not fit to be the commander-in-chief. And now I think even his supporters know it. Marjorie Taylor Greene said effectively, she said, trigger the 25th Amendment now. 25th Amendment now. That he's a madman. And so that's how we come on the air here on the Midas Touch Network, on the intersection of law and politics. The 25th Amendment we know is hard. It takes brass ones for the vice president, and that's not something that's ever been that J.D. Vance has ever been accused of having. He'd have to have the strength of his convictions. He'd have to have moral fortitude and a belief in our democracy, which is non-existent, in order to start the process. And then the majority of the cabinet, and look at the majority of the cabinet. Who's going to do it? Todd Blanche. I feel like I'm doing A Few Good Men and Jack Nicholson. Who's going to do it? You, Weinberg. You, Lutnick. You, you, Marco Rubio. No. Again, a 25th Amendment proof cabinet is what Donald Trump selected for himself, which means that the Democrats have to take up the arms of the impeachment process. They can start it now. They may not be able to conclude it until the midterms are over, but they can start it now. They need 218 votes to get that up and running. They're damn close now with all these special elections. I think they're only within 3 or 4 votes of that. And there are Republicans in the House who would join. There are some that are independents that caucus with the Republicans who would join such a thing. Representative Kevin Kiley, for instance, is an independent who caucuses with the Republicans. Here's what he had to say today. The United States does not destroy civilizations. It's like a Marvel movie. Nor do we threaten to do so as some sort of negotiating tactic. We should all desire a future of freedom, security, and prosperity for the people of Iran. Congress has a responsibility to conduct oversight with respect to ongoing military operations and our obligations. That's the kind of guy that would slide over and side with the Democrats in an impeachment proceeding if Donald Trump persists. And he should. Pete Hegseth, remember him? Well, for the 12 or 13 years he was on the B team for Fox and Friends, the junior varsity on the weekend edition, when he wasn't in hair and makeup, he was doing like guest lectures at military academies. And lo and behold, he addressed out of the top of his head about what would happen if there was illegal, unconstitutional orders and what a soldier in the chain of command should do in response to that. This is the same guy that went after Senator Mark Kelly to try to demote him and censure him, take away his pension or whatever it was. That got blocked by the judge in the ballroom cases, Judge Leon. We'll talk about him later. And Pete Hegseth, runs around calling everybody patriots and drumming out of the core and out of the brass anybody who's black, brown, or a woman. That Pete Hegseth. But when he was a professor for the day, Pete Hegseth, here's what he had to say.
There are some guys at Leavenworth who made really bad choices on the battlefield. And I do think there have to be consequences for abject war crimes. If you're doing something that is just completely unlawful and ruthless, then there is a consequence for that. That's why the military said it won't follow unlawful orders from their commander-in-chief. There's a standard, there's an ethos, there's a belief that we are above what so many things that our enemies or others would do.
Yeah, there's a standard, there's an ethos. We're above what our enemies would do, except when you become the Secretary of Defense. And this is the problem with these people. And it'll be a common theme on the intersection. It's this magical thinking that, video clips won't be unearthed or emails won't be found, or we won't follow the consistency of thought necessary to hold these people accountable, and that we'll be distracted in some way. Midas Touch, Legal AF, we don't get distracted. We drill down on these concepts. We stay with them until they're complete. We follow the story wherever it leads, and we do it truthfully to our best of our ability. That's our oath, and that we swear to our Midas Touch community, to our Legal AF community, that we won't blow smoke or sunshine, that we'll use our First Amendment right to protect yours. And that's why we're on the Midas Touch Network. So with that, without further ado, I have my special guest tonight. I wanted to introduce him to not only the Midas audience, but to the Legal AF and Intersection audience, Scott McFarland. Hi, Scott.
Hey, this is a nice treat. I'm glad you had me.
As soon as I heard you were on, I was like, oh, we got to find different ways to get Scott on with me. How about the Intersection, Legal AF? We'll do some Substack lives. And here you are. What a special delight. Our audience, I wanted to, I'm on every Tuesday night here with this show. And you and I have so much great overlapping areas of our practice, of our coverage, that it's such a natural fit. Why don't you first, rather than drop the needle in the middle of the record, why don't we back up a little bit for those that are kind of joining a little bit later the story about not what you did at CBS, but what are you doing at Midas, and what are your plans in terms of Scott McFarland News and on the Midas Network, your own channel, the Bureau, and all of that? Why don't you get everybody excited about that, and then we can talk about some of the stories from today.
My own mother says I look 10 years younger now that I've joined Midas Touch Network. And I think she meant that as a compliment. And I think she meant her best, but it's a tough way to communicate the fact that I really do feel liberated. I feel like a new man. Like, this is now unfiltered journalism that I can bring right to you, directly to the camera, as soon as I get it, without having to wait for, all the network affiliates to line up, without having to wait for several camera people and studio lights and somebody to come in and do my makeup for me. This is now a one-on-one medium. I can tell you.
You're doing your own makeup. You're doing your own makeup now.
I am doing my own makeup. I swear to you, Mike, this sounds made up. I swear, in network television, they have somebody who'll comb your hair for you. And respectfully, this ain't a complex hairstyle. I got it. It's not, I've had the same haircut since I was 3. I'm good. But all the logistics that go into broadcast television, and so many of them are necessary, but it takes time. It takes manpower. And when you have news, you just want to get after it and tell people. And this is a wonderful marriage because Midas Touch and I have long shared the same editorial values. You don't platform lies. You don't platform conspiracy theories. You don't whitewash history. You don't let this stuff trickle into the information ecosphere. And we share this unbridled concern about the future of democracy, watching so many institutions crumble and watching so many norms be shattered, had the same interests. And so respectfully, this was a marriage that was destined to happen. And we're really glad it's here.
And talk about what as the bureau chief for DC and, not just in the intersection of law and politics where I live, but in general Capitol Hill reporting and original reporting and things like that. Talk about what you're currently doing and then maybe some projection about where you think you'll be with Midas and us in a year.
I want to say this declaratively and emphatically. We are going to go. I will go where there's actually some freaking news happening in DC. And respectfully, it's not that the president doesn't make news. Lord knows he does. But there's about roughly, I'm estimating, 1 trillion people covering his every Truth Social post, his every utterance, his every press conference. We don't need that. That is redundant at best. And again, I'm not going to platform lies or misinformation. So who is making news that isn't getting enough coverage? There is an awful lot at the intersection of law and politics. What the federal courts and federal judges, appellate judges are doing, what some of these nonprofit litigation firms are doing in protection of democracy is incredibly newsworthy. What state attorneys general are doing, the Democratic state attorneys general have challenged this administration on a lot of fronts and won a lot of fights. A lot of news there, not getting enough attention. What at this moment, the minority party in Congress is doing seems to be more newsworthy. The Congress seems to be unilaterally disarming. So the most meaty or interesting investigations are actually being launched by the minority party. And some of the most compelling arguments, in a rarity, is being made by the minority party. So I'm going to pay a lot of attention to what the committees and members of the Democratic caucus are doing at this moment in time. That could shift. And I certainly think we don't spend nearly enough time covering the threat to elections and voting. It's a big stinking deal. And we're getting there. We're in primary season. The general election, early voting is less than 200 days away in some states. And there are some real concerns about the threats to not just the voting itself, but to whatever the results are after. That's where the news is right now. We don't need me covering every Trump Truth Social post. We're good with that.
Ben will do that. I got another chill down my spine listening to that, your remit and that agenda. That's great. So why don't we give the audience a little bit of a taste of what Scott McFarlane platformed on Midas looks like. Let's talk about, there's a press conference today for the guy who's trying out for the job of Attorney General. So many people apparently want this job. I don't know why. As you and I joked about it, it's like a short-term gig. I don't know why anybody would want it, but whether it's Lee Zeldin, the EPA director, administrator, or it's Alina Habba, or it's Janine Pirro, or it's Phil. You and I could go on. We do a whole show just listing names. But Todd Blanche has the job for now. Donald Trump's former lead criminal defense lawyer, not his first one, but certainly his last one, accomplished a lot for Donald Trump. I mean, I'm willing to give credit to evil genius. I mean, he was able to even though Donald Trump got convicted of 34 felony counts, the sentencing was a big nothing. He was able to delay the criminal cases long enough that Donald Trump.
That's the bottom line right there. The delay tactics were uniquely effective.
Absolutely, he was able to delay both Jack Smith's prosecutions, and ultimately, even though he wasn't directly involved, he was behind the scenes in Fulton County, and then he got through the team, including John Sauer, the immunity decision out of the United States Supreme Court, and the Colorado insurrectionist decision about who can be on, not be on a ballot, and who makes that decision. So he was rewarded with the bridesmaid job. He got the number 2 job, even though he's been dying to get the number 1 job, as is Harmeet Dillon. I'll talk about her a little bit later, the head of the Civil Rights Division. But this is like a tryout for him. And it may be a way for Donald Trump to figure out whether MAGA and the rightist of right wing will support a Todd Blanche as Attorney General, because there's always been a sneaking suspicion among MAGA that he's a Democrat, or he's not sufficiently a Trump loyalist or not. And he said some things that got leaked out about that. So he's got the tryout, right? He's still, Pam Bondi's apparently still around. They're going on a business trip in a couple of days. I don't even know what that's about. But he had a press conference today. Let me play 2 clips, and you and I can bat it around. First one is, he actually says that no one knows why Pam Bondi was fired. Let's play the clip.
And tomorrow, and it's going to happen in the coming days.
Do you believe Pam Bondi lost her job, though, because she was not successful in that pursuit?
You read the same exact communication from the president that I did. Pam Bondi is a trusted friend of President Trump's, will remain so. And no, nobody has any idea why the Attorney General is no longer the Attorney General and I'm the acting Attorney General, except for President Trump.
2 questions. One, kind of house.
Okay, let's, before we go to the other one, Scott McFarlane on that comment.
He may be auditioning for a job, but let's not get caught up in this idea of who's confirmable and who's not confirmable by this U.S. Senate, because we saw in Trump 1.0, he likes acting cabinet members, potentially because he can exact more leverage on them to do his bidding. And certainly it's not the Department of Justice's job historically to do a president's bidding. Pam Bondi changed that paradigm, which is why her firing was perhaps so shocking to people, because she was truly politicizing a department which is not to be politicized. As an acting Attorney General, perhaps Trump has more ability to press on Todd Blanche. Maybe the next person in that role is going to be an acting too. It gives him a little more latitude. And at this moment in time, I'm not sure who's confirmable as Attorney General, not because there aren't 50 Republican votes for somebody, there are. But if North Carolina's Tom Tillis is going to be a no in committee where he has a swing vote on anybody who denies January 6th, well, pretty much everybody Trump wants for Attorney General is going to be a January 6th denier, whether they really are or not. I'm not sure I see how anybody gets through with the approval of the Senate Judiciary Committee.
That's a very good point, because Tillis, who's also the swing vote in the Fed chair position, because he's on the banking committee, boy, is he going out. They should have been nicer to Tom Tillis. Tom Tillis, it was like, I'm not running again, and I don't care, and I'm going to block the worst instincts of Donald Trump. But you're right. He said out loud in a press conference, he's not going to. And he can make it get stuck in committee and not and block anybody. I like your thought process about acting interims give Donald Trump a lot of pressure. Look, there's no doubt in anybody's mind that Todd Blanche has wanted this job. He left Cadwalader, a law firm in New York, took on one client, took Emil Bovee with him. And people, when he was interviewed by, it was either New Yorker magazine, and they said, well, why would you leave your white shoe job and your career and give it all up for, he says, are you kidding me? The opportunity and the chance to, make new law and then ... become Attorney General. Everybody knew he wanted Attorney General. Now he got passed over the first time around, right? It was either Aileen Cannon, who was listed on a sheet that was leaked and never denied, the judge down in Miami, that it was Matt Gaetz, who had a little problem of allegations of child sex trafficking. Sounds familiar. And then, oh, here we go. And what? Oh, Pam Bondi. So he's always the bridesmaid, never the bride. And yet he stands up at press conferences today and says, and takes the omerta oath in favor of Donald Trump. Let's play the next clip.
Now that you're in this position, how are you going to balance that relentless pressure with this administration's promise to end the weaponization of this department?
Well, look, first of all, we have thousands of ongoing investigations and prosecutions going on in this country right now. And it is true that some of them involve men, women, and entities that the president in the past has had issues with and that believe should be investigated. That is his right, and indeed it is his duty to do that. meaning to lead this country. And so I do not view this as pressure.
All right. So tryouts.
Yeah, there's a couple things I want to unpack in that answer because there's a lot loaded in there, intentionally or otherwise. He's asked if there are investigations of people Trump doesn't like and wants targeted, and he doesn't obviously deny that. He excuses that. That is a historic break of the independence of the Department of Justice from the White House. Right there, said declaratively and explicitly. But also, I can't get past how the administration is prioritizing fraud. That was the point of today's news conference, to talk about a new effort to combat fraud. Now, there, first of all, are plenty of people, civil servants, trained professionals inside the Department of Justice who are quite good at finding fraud, investigating fraud, and prosecuting fraud. And I know this because they successfully prosecuted many dozens of people who Trump has pardoned for fraud. That includes George Santos, but the Chrisleys, the reality show couple, about the sheriff from Culpeper County, Virginia, Scott Jenkins, who was pardoned on his way, on the eve of reporting to prison, about the congressman, Henry Cuellar of Texas, who was pardoned before he ever went to a trial before a jury of his peers, which is also a break from the tradition of pardon power, where you're supposed to make amends, make restitution, pay your debt, and exhaust your appeals. Trump's just throwing them out there at famous people for fraud, which makes all of this seem somewhat self-defeating.
You're right. And then if you total up all the money and the restitution that's never going to be paid, the hundreds and hundreds, almost $500 million that Donald Trump also just conveniently wiped out. Look, this is the guy that let the Honduran president walk out the front doors, probably the largest drug dealer, not named Maduro, in that region. Billions and billions and billions of dollars, opened the door and let him out. So, right. And we thought that we saw the beginnings of that, right? When J.D. Vance held his press conference instead of Pam Bondi about the appointment of a new special prosecutor about things related to fraud. We're like, what is going on? Well, somebody's told them in the polling that the way to distract attention from your own grift is to say that you're going after other people's fraud. And I guess he's seeing of this, he's running it up the flagpole.
There's going to be some line of people looking for pardons who are going to argue, hey, we don't use the normal system anymore. We don't go through civil servants who check our documents, check our papers, people like the former pardon attorney Liz Oyer, who was fired. There's this new system that somehow exists, and I don't know how that genie gets back in the bottle eventually. Maybe it's the next president. Maybe it takes a few more administrations before that gets back together. But that's really a destabilizing thing, because not only does it empower and embolden some potential criminals, but that money is to go to victims. They're not making the government whole. They're making victims whole. When you pardon and remove the responsibility of restitution from convicted criminals, it's the victims taking another hit. And I've always mentioned this in my reporting, but in the January 6th case, the victims who were not made whole financially were you and me. It was taxpayers. Taxpayers spent millions of dollars rebuilding, restoring, fixing, cleaning the Capitol. And all of those 1,500 plus defendants who were pardoned by Trump were exonerated from their restitution to taxpayers.
And if that chaps your backside, what Scott just said, wait till you start adding up all the money that he's going to be using of taxpayer dollars to pay back or give money to Michael Flynn. And now it'll probably be Steve Bannon. And it was Ashley Babbitt's estate. Millions and millions and millions of dollars in order for Donald Trump to continue his rewrite of history. He's not spending his own money. He's spending our money in giving it back to these people for no good reason.
He also has the claim in there, Michael, you may recall from last fall, for $230 million for himself as a Tort Claim Act damage reward for the prosecutions for the Mar-a-Lago classified records and for election subversion. We don't exactly know where that case stands or where that Claims Act request stands, but we do know there's a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit that's been filed this week asking the Department of Justice to come up with some records and explain if the money's already been given to the president from taxpayers approved by the president's administration.
Oh, you think it's possible that he already got paid out?
The questions in the Freedom of Information Act lawsuit raise that possibility. If there's been some disbursement, we want records on that too. And the reason the lawsuit was filed by Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington is because they say that question has not been answered, even though they've submitted it through the FOIA process. So they don't know. The public doesn't know. Money could be changed hands already from taxpayers to Trump. And again, this strikes people as gobsmacking because it's Trump's administration that would approve his money.
Absolutely. His DOJ would approve him getting paid, or has been paid, the $230 million. Why don't we end our time together here with this new reporting based on a little bit of an older story? I think you and I talked about it, or did it a few weeks ago. Cassidy Hutchinson, who was like 25 years old, who had the misfortune of happening to be, in fact, only because she was replacing somebody that was at a dentist appointment, but she happened to be at Jan 6th, in the White House, and observed many things as a fly on the wall, and had conversations with people like the head of the Secret Service detail at the time about what went down with Donald Trump in his dining room while he watched the Capitol burn, what happened in the Beast after he gave the ellipse speech. And she testified with great courage to having been threatened by MAGA. She obtained a very good lawyer. She had a lawyer that Trump tried to give her, and when was trying to guide her not to testify. She finally got the right lawyer. She testified under great personal sacrifice. I think she wrote a book about that sacrifice and trying to confide, trying to get advice from her parents. She was a very young person, and now the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice is investigating Cassidy Hutchinson. What do you make of that?
I have one Department of Justice source who confirms the reporting from the New York Times that there's an open investigation into Cassidy Hutchinson and an aspiration to bring charges. The Department of Justice itself has not confirmed that. Let's get that out of the way. Cassidy Hutchinson has been a target for Trump ever since she did give that public testimony to the January 6th Select Committee. And you got to remember, that wasn't just committee testimony behind closed doors. That was on national television with millions of viewers when she recounted what she saw at the White House on January 6, 2021. It took an awful lot of courage. It took a lot of work behind the scenes by the January 6 Select Committee to secure that testimony, and it was powerful. She described a political hellscape at the White House as the Capitol was being overrun by Trump supporters and a violent mob. Now, the Trump allies have questioned at least one component of Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony. She spoke secondhand. She said in so many words, she heard from someone else that there may have been an incident in the Beast in which Trump may have made her reach for the steering wheel. She said she didn't see it herself, hear it herself, but that was recounted to her by another Trump aide. Now, that story seems to have evaporated. The person who told her that denies it. So that secondhand information is just that, secondhand information. But Trump allies have seized on that to somehow question or color the rest of her testimony, which she told firsthand.
Right.
How that could ever be kindling for a criminal case is beyond me. But that's not quite the point, is it? You've seen with these investigations of other people in Trump's circle of enemies, Adam Schiff, Eric Swalwell, James Comey, Letitia James, right, Jerome Powell, Lisa Cook, Cassidy Hutchinson, that sometimes the process is the plan, that threatening a federal investigation is such a burden on somebody, to their mental well-being, to their blood pressure, not to mention their finances and their professional future, that just acknowledging there's an investigation can be pain enough.
Oh, I have no doubt in my mind that all Donald Trump wanted was for you and I, the New York Times, to report criminal probe opened against Adam Schiff and Letitia James over mortgage fraud. That's all he wanted. He then got bored with the story after that. Yes, he gets on the DOJ. Why aren't you doing more? Why aren't you getting these cases out the door, and the rest of it? But he got his pound of flesh. You know, they have to go get lawyers, and John Brennan, you know, maybe even Barack Obama had to go get a lawyer related to this. Clinton certainly did, and the rest. And this is just the retribution campaign. And to have Todd Blanche, as we showed the clip, stand in front of the American people, you know, like he's an Eagle Scout, and say it's his right. It's not his right to use the Department of Justice to go after his personal vendetta list. He's seeking justice. I mean, this Orwellian flip of vocabulary that in order to be in the Trump world you have to use is just, it's just head spinning. And all of these people that you and I talked about, other than Donald Trump, have law licenses that they should worry about. There was a prior group of Trump lawyers who got indicted, convicted, lost their bar licenses, got fined, or all five of those things. And yet this group operates like they have immunity, presidential immunity, the way that Donald Trump does, and they don't. And whether it's today or in the future, the statute of limitations on obstruction of justice, on lying to Congress, is going to go over and go beyond the Trump administration's final days and into the next presidency and the next Department of Justice. Yet they act like they have complete impunity. What do you think?
Let me add the downside for Trump on all this. He certainly has raised expectations that his enemies will be jailed, that those who are responsible for rigging an election or faking an insurrection or targeting Republicans needlessly will be jailed. And he has some number of people who bought into that campaign pledge and that promise who are deeply disappointed at his inner circle that there are not people in jail. Pam Bondi was drawing the ire of MAGA loyalists, including on social media and on mainstream media interviews for months, because they didn't jail anybody for rigging the election or jail anybody for setting up Michael Flynn or Donald Trump or name your favorite foil. He's raised expectations that Todd Blanche is to lock up Trump's enemies. That's just not a tenable thing for a few reasons. The allegations of crimes are bogus, or another word, and grand juries don't buy them. Judges are cynical. The prosecutors, if they're making full-hearted cases, are not making successful cases. And this is a problem for him inside his base. And you can see it bit Pam Bondi. Next person is going to have the same trouble because they cannot get these things past the firewalls of juries, grand jurors, judges, and the court system.
Absolutely. Scott McFarlane, I'm so pleased that you're on here now with the Midas universe. Same. And running things in the DC Bureau and otherwise. And I look forward to not only having you back on The Intersection, you and I doing things together on your channel, on Legal AF, on Substack Lives together. Tell people now, we'll put it down in notes, all the different platforms where they can see your work.
My nightly report, Scott McFarlane Reports, posts on YouTube and Substack as soon as we stop the record. It is done one time. There are no second takes, no third takes. I can tell you, as somebody in television for 25 years, if you start redoing things, somebody's going to figure out that it's edited or it's been perfected and it's not genuine and authentic. So flaws and all, we will post whatever we do for Scott McFarlane Reports in real time as soon as we record. On Substack, you'll see my day ahead newsletter, which is the thing I socialized inside of CBS News for many years. It was the behind the what's worth tracking today editorially that you can't find online in the news sources and that you don't see in press releases, that hasn't been covered already. It's a real insider's guide to what to expect out of the news. I now provide it to you because it seems like you read it, which distinguishes you from some of my previous colleagues at previous places of employment for many years that didn't quite read everything I wrote. And lastly, you'll see me on all the socials. There are 24/7 updates on Twitter, Blue Sky, Instagram, TikTok, and increasingly on Substack.
And you got a Midas Touch mug. Look at you.
That was provided to me free of charge, and it'll take about 5 days for one of the kids to accidentally break it. I'll give it time.
I'm with you. Scott McFarlane, Midas Touch. So pleased to have you here on The Intersection and beyond.
Thanks, Michael.
We're going to take a quick break from our sponsors here at The Intersection. And thanks for all that you do to support The Intersection in particular. I got great news. I think I'm allowed to say this, that we are up for 2 major awards. The Intersection podcast, there it is. For the Webbies, it's like the Oscars, but nerdier for podcast. Best New Podcast News, The Intersection. Best Podcast News, Legal AF. We're in the lead right now with 9 days or so left to go in the People's Voice Award, which frankly is the one I want to win. It's because of voting. Over 2.5 million people have already voted, not just for ours, but in the total for the Webby contest, if you will. And they're going to announce it, I think, on the 18th of April. And if we win, we'll go to New York and accept the awards on your behalf. Why are they important? They're important because it's not just ego. Trust me, I've got enough I got enough awards, but it gives us the street cred and the the sort of the halo effect to bring on and continue to bring on all the great guests that we bring on. The Representative Summer Lee and Representative Jamie Raskin, Senator Blumenthal, Governor Shapiro, authors who write in these types of areas, the heads of the American Civil Liberties Union, of Democracy Forward, of the LGBTQ Rights Center, and all of that. That helps us. It helps my bookers, if you will, get the guests that you want. I mean, we're built at Legal AF and on the intersection on commentary. But it's always great to be able to land and get a great guest to talk who's a newsmaker about something that you're interested in. And then, of course, we've got the things that undergird all that we do at the intersection. My work on Legal AF, the YouTube channel, continue to need support there. Just go on Legal AF YouTube, hit the subscribe button. If you want to become a paid member, all the better. We do 12 videos a day, every day at the intersection of law and politics, including some things that are available only to paid members. And then we've got Legal AF Substack, which is a whole nother universe, parallel universe, if you will. It's like a multiverse of Legal AF, where we have another 8 to 10 things a day that go up there that are unique in writing. I do literally live reporting there, a live show. It's called the Popok Pop-Up. Try to do it around lunchtime, Eastern time every day to bring you up to speed on all these stories. I'm going to be doing one soon with somebody like Scott McFarlane. And then we've got our pro-democracy sponsors who are now here on the intersection. And here's our break. The playoff push is heating up and tournament hoops are here. And there's no better way to cash in on the high-flying hoops action than Prize Picks, where it always feels good to be right. Every bucket, every dime, and every win means more when you're playing on Prize Picks. So don't pass up your next shot with Prize Picks and get $50 instantly in lineups when you play your first $5. Look, I've been playing Prize Picks recently, and honestly, I don't know why I waited so long. It's super simple to get started, and the app makes watching games way more fun. For example, I'm looking at Jalen Brunson's points projection for the next Knicks game and going with more. It just makes every possession way more exciting to follow. Prize Picks is simple to play. You just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and if you get your picks right, you could cash in. I also love that you can mix different sports in one lineup or stack multiple projections from the same player. And with early payouts, if your player gets off to a hot start, you can choose to cash out before the game even ends. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code INTERSECTION to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code INTERSECTION to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. If you're like me and you've searched for your name or address in Google, it is shocking to find how many results have your personal information. It's not by chance. Data brokers and people search sites collect your personal information, your name, address, phone number, financial info, income, and hundreds of other records. They sell and share it publicly without your consent. But Incogni is here to put an end to that. You sign up, you give them permission to act on your behalf, and they go out and demand that data brokers delete your personal info. You don't have to email anyone, fill out forms, or jump through hoops. They handle the entire data removal process for you. It doesn't just do that and walk away. Incogni also continuously monitors if your data is put back onto these databases, requesting repeated removals, keeping your data yours forever. Incogni has also launched a new feature called Custom Data Removals, available in their unlimited plan. It allows you to send in any link from any site that exposes your data, and then Incogni's privacy professionals will go after it. No bots, no forms, just real people making your data disappear. Total legends. This is especially useful for removing records from places like legal databases or people's search engines that don't play nice with traditional opt-outs. Right now, you can get 60% off their annual plans by heading to incogni.com/truth and using the code TRUTH at checkout. It's also completely risk-free. Incogni offers a 30-day money-back guarantee if you're not satisfied with them removing your personal information off the internet. Live free from dangerous spam by using Incogni. That's incogni.com/truth for 60% off their annual plans. And we are back. And, right on time. Thank you, Donald Trump, for not wiping out an entire civilization while we're on the air. We have, of course, the new reporting that, as expected, because the prime minister of Pakistan told him, hey, why don't you not wipe out the 90 million person country? That's not going to help us. Donald Trump just posted, based on, it's just crazier shit. Based on conversations with Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif and a field marshal of Pakistan, wherein they requested I hold off the destructive force being sent tonight to Iran and subject to the Islamic Republic of Iran agreeing to complete, immediate, and safe opening of the Strait of Hormuz, I'll suspend the bombing and attack of Iran for 2 weeks. But it's a double-sided ceasefire, everybody. This is his words, all in caps. And then my favorite part of this is he claims that they've already agreed to a 10-point proposal. And on behalf of the United States of America as president, and also representing the countries of the Middle East, nothing like America First, where you're also apparently the president of the countries of the Middle East. And then immediately after he posted that, there were rockets that were fired by Iran at Tel Aviv. Well, so much for a double-sided ceasefire. Doesn't change anything that we've talked about this evening at all. Removal by way of the 25th Amendment and or impeachment are required. The democracy requires it, and the rest. And let me turn to, speaking of the Jan 6 committee and things like that, leave it to the historians. The American Historical Association has run to court in record time, along with American Oversight, another group, to challenge Donald Trump's Office of Legal Counsel issuing a 50-page cover-your-ass memo that tells Donald Trump he can destroy and hold on to documents from his presidency, presidential papers, and treat them as his personal papers. Donald Trump is basically right now, I'm sure, destroying things in his office based on this Office of Legal Counsel memo. Of course, a president who is indicted for Espionage Act and obstruction of justice by taking top secret classified documents with him to Mar-a-Lago would have his Office of Legal Counsel say it's all okay. In fact, beyond that it's a constitutional violation of the separation of powers for the Article 1 branch of Congress to tell the Article 2 branch of the presidency what to do with their papers. And there's a big fly in the ointment in that argument. Buried in the 50 pages, at least they reference the leading Supreme Court precedent, which is Nixon, our last criminal president, versus the General Services Administration, the GSA. And in that case from 1978, sorry. No, by the way, nobody cared about that on the intersection but me. But I wanted to get it right. Stays in the pod. In the 1978 ruling, a very similar argument was raised against a very similar Presidential Records Act. The predecessor to the Presidential Records Act was a statute passed by Congress because Nixon wanted to take the secret tapes he was making. Yes, he had a secret taping machine in the White House that nobody knew about until Watergate. He wanted to take the tapes with him. Sort of like Clinton and the sock drawer, with his memoir. They're mine. I get to take them with me. No, you don't. You don't. Along with a million other pages of documents. And so, would you believe it? Our founding fathers and our framers didn't put in the Constitution a detailed scheme to hold on to papers because they never thought anybody would try to take them with them. And we need them. The National Archive needs them. Future historians and journalists need them. The people, they're the people's papers, right? Why classify anything if the president can walk out the door with them? So the American History Association, which is incorporated by Congress in the late 1800s, normally deal with like dusty manuscripts, but sometimes have to stand in for Americans and file a suit in federal court, which they just did today, to basically have an injunction to make sure that the Trump administration from the top to the bottom isn't, putting kindling in the fireplace of presidential records, and that they comply with the Presidential Records Act. So it seeks an injunction to enforce the Presidential Records Act, to find that Donald Trump has violated the Constitution. And buried within the complaint, my favorite section, is where they quoted from effectively Jamie Raskin's letter, the Representative Raskin's letter, to then Attorney General Pam Bondi about a memo that had been inadvertently disclosed to the Judiciary Committee by Pam Bondi's Department of Justice from Jack Smith to Merrick Garland, in which he said, I think we figured it out. I'm paraphrasing. I think we figured it out, boss, why Trump stole the documents. Profit motive. He wanted to keep it in order to extort or to monetize in some way. Because remember, just to bring us back to that time period, Trump didn't think he'd be president again. President again after Jan 6th, after the attack on the Capitol? No, he was going to go back into business. He ran again after he figured out he might need to do that in order to get out from under all the criminal cases against him. And so, profit motive. In fact, Jamie Raskin, and this is recited in the complaint brought by the American History Association and American Oversight in the court filing, to say, we have real fear that Donald Trump's going to do it again because he did it last time. And then they mentioned the memo. But I interviewed Jamie Raskin recently about that very thing. And here's a clip.
To us, information that included a progress report from one of Jack Smith's lawyers saying that there was a clear business motive, that's what they thought was behind his pilfering of all these documents, including the one that was so top secret, only 6 people in the entire government could see it, one of them being the president of the United States. And then that, he's brandishing and waving around these documents on an airplane, obviously engaging in completely cavalier and promiscuous use of these documents that he kept, in the bathrooms and ballrooms and under the pool tables and ping pong tables at Mar-a-Lago. In response, the White House has been dragging my name in the mud all weekend, saying Raskin has zero credibility, no credibility. All I did was release the document they sent us by accident, right? So I don't need much credibility to say, here's what the Department of Justice just sent us. Now,
right. But I love when it shows back up, Special Counsel Jack Smith back again on presidential records, front and center in a lawsuit. And we're going to cover that. It's going to move fast on Legal AF and Legal AF Substack, where I'll be doing some live reporting. Then we've got before I get to the penultimate story today, is going to be about Epstein scandal once again. I mean, everybody wants to put it back everybody in the Trump administration, led by Todd Blanche and Donald Trump, want to put it in the rearview mirror. I mean, one of the things Donald Trump thought was a byproduct of firing the bumbling Pam Bondi was that they could stop talking about Epstein. And who's not going to let them stop talking about Epstein? Our audience, the democracy, the Democrats, anybody, need I go on? So no matter how many times Todd Blanche says, it's all over now, it's in the rearview mirror, it really isn't. And still the Oversight Committee continues, led by Republican James Comer. Next up is Howard Lutnick. Now, there's a lot of reasons that Donald Trump would want to fire Howard Lutnick. He was the architect of the failed tariff scheme that wrecked our economy. Good job there. He's also he's gotten sideways apparently with people in the administration, Elon Musk and Scott Bessent and other people. He's not well liked, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And as people know, full disclosure, I used to work for the guy many years ago. I worked as global head of litigation for a company of his. And I have no insider knowledge of anything I'm going to be reporting on now, especially about Epstein. But Lutnick knew he had an Epstein problem. And now there's calls for him to be fired. I mean, Tom Massey, who's the leader, along with Ro Khanna, of the getting Epstein survivors' dignity, getting those files released. He said, and he's a Republican, he said Lutnick should do Trump a favor and just resign. And yet he tried to get out ahead of the story. But the problem is he's got the same disease that Trump does, thinking maybe the Epstein files won't ever be released. And I won't have to admit that I went to Epstein's Island with my children for lunch in 2012, teenage children, years after Epstein was publicly convicted of effectively child rape. You know, this is where you take your children, you know, as you're yachting through the Caribbean with another couple, you know. So Trump, so I guess Lutnick thought he could get away with not admitting to the fact that he had these close connections with Epstein, raising $50,000 for Epstein for Trump's favorite charity, having lunch with him, trying to get him to join some groups to oppose some construction near their townhouses, because they have adjoining townhouses. They live next door they had lived next door to each other. So he went on Miranda Devine, a podcast that nobody watches. They're not going to win the Webbies. Miranda Devine's podcast, however, is produced by the New York Post, owned by Rupert Murdoch. And it's like a safe space for MAGA to go, and she throws softballs at them and all of that. Like this gauzy, you know, it looks like they put Vaseline over the camera, so everybody looks great lighting and all of that. And he goes on there, and he didn't tell the truth. We have a clip.
Mr. Epstein, your neighbor, would like to invite you over for coffee. So my wife and I go next door. You know, we walk the 7 steps, right, to the next house for coffee. We share a wall, right. So it's in New York City. So he invites us in. We have coffee in this, and he says, "Do you want a tour?" We said, "Great,
interesting."
He's got a really big house.
Every room you went into.
He's got. Well, I'll tell you. So his house is like super big, really wide, and so he gives me a tour in the living room, big living room. And then across from it is double doors. I assume it's the dining room.
Yeah.
And he opens the doors, and there's a massage table in the middle of the room.
Ooh.
And candles all around and stuff. So I ask very insightful, cutting questions. I say to him, "Massage table in the middle of your house? How often do you have a massage?" And he says, "Every day." And then he gets weirdly close to me.
Ooh.
And he says, "And the right kind of massage."
Ooh.
Now, my wife is standing here. So she looks at me, and I look at her, and we say, "I'm sorry, we have to go." And we left. And in the 6 or 8 steps it takes to get from his house to my house, my wife and I decided that I will never be in the room with that disgusting person ever again. Really? So I was never in the room with him socially, for business, or for even philanthropy. If that guy was there, I wasn't going, because he's gross.
So as you heard, he said as of 2005, he had no more contact with the guy. 2008, Epstein is convicted of a state charge related to child prostitution. That's called raping a child. And that's public. Now you think, well, there's no more contacts, right? Not exactly. And this is where Senator Van Hollen gets Epstein under oath. They're there to talk about something else, but you got to talk about the Epstein files at that moment. And wouldn't you know it, that Lutnick takes his wife to work that day to sit behind him. What a coward. What secretary of a cabinet level position takes his wife to a Senate hearing? Okay, anyway, let's play Senator Van Hollen.
Lutnick, I think you understand the root of concern here. It's the way you described very emphatically your first encounter with him in his apartment, said you were disgusted, would never have any contact with him again. Did you, in fact, make the visit to Jeffrey Epstein's private island?
I did have lunch with him as I was on a boat going across on a family vacation. My wife was with me, as were my 4 children and nannies. I had another couple they were there as well with their children, and we had lunch on the island. That is true, for an hour, and we left with all of my children, with my nannies and my wife, all together. We were on family vacation. We were not apart. To suggest there was anything untoward about that in 2012, I don't recall why we did it, but
Mr. Secretary, again, as I said, there's...
Okay, he's got a problem, right? Well, it was with nannies and babies and teenagers, and yeah, it's not good. And lots of other emails that came out of the Epstein files that have his fingerprints on it. Now, he is close to Lutnick. I mean, he is close to Trump, Lutnick is. So that may be his saving grace. But as I've said before, Trump's going to get rid of half of his cabinet, if not more, because he can't admit his own defeat. He can't admit that his failing poll numbers, his failed administration, 70% of America that wants to see him go, is his fault. So he'll blame people like Lutnick. But with the Epstein scandal and Lutnick not leveling with the American people, he certainly has a big problem, and he'll be giving testimony in May. Remember, side note, Pam Bondi has an April 14th subpoena that's still outstanding for her to testify about the Epstein files. Although I was right that she wasn't going to make it to that hearing as the sitting attorney general, and Lutnick may not make it as the Commerce Secretary. Let me end today's intersection talking about mail-in ballots and some good news there. Donald Trump last Tuesday, a week ago today, entered an executive order or signed an executive order in order to have the Department of Homeland Security create a database with Social Security and then use the Postal Service to enforce it, to deny you your mail-in ballot, either getting it or sending it in. Okay? Sounds like it's a violation of Article 1 of the Constitution, the 10th Amendment, and the separation of powers, and it is. And so multiple suits got filed. There's about 7 or 8 of them. The American Civil Liberties Union filed for the League of Women's Voters, and the NAACP filed, Democratic Causes filed, different things. And they got assigned to cases, 2 judges in Massachusetts. But the one I want to focus on is Judge Colleen Kolar-Catelli. And the reason is Judge Kolar-Catelli now has all the cases in D.C. in front of her. And just at the end of January, she had a very similar executive order in front of her by the same president, in which he tried to impose voter ID, sound familiar, in order to vote in a federal election. And so she took that on. And when she wrote her opinion, this is what she wrote. And if you don't think she's about to write almost the exact same thing in blocking the mail-in ballot executive order, you got another thing coming. Here's she'll just do copy paste. These consolidated cases are about the limits of the president's power to dictate the rules of federal elections. This was an 110-page opinion. The framers of our Constitution recognized that power over elections could be abused, either to destroy the national government or to disempower the people from acting as a check on their elected representatives. Accordingly, they entrusted this power to the parts of our government that they believe would be the most responsive to the will of the people. First to the states, and then, in some instances, to Congress. They assigned no role at all to the president. Put simply, our Constitution does not allow the president to impose unilateral changes to federal election procedures. She could just say, see prior order at this rate. And this is going to move fast. You got Judge Talwani in Massachusetts with a couple of cases, including by the 21 attorneys general. Democratic groups down in D.C. Donald Trump's Supreme Court forced people to file these multiple lawsuits because of there's limitations on the ability of a court to issue a nationwide injunction after the Supreme Court made a ruling last year or this year. And so that's why you're seeing these multiple cases. But I like the odds with Judge Colleen Kolar-Catelli in place on this particular matter for sure. Without a doubt. So we're going to continue to follow it. I'm glad you're here on The Intersection. Such great news. Scott McFarlane has joined the Midas universe. We'll be doing some regular work with me also on Legal AF and on Substack Live. We got the Webby Awards, right? We're going to, hopefully we're going to get them. We're 9 days away. We're in first place. The Intersection, best new podcast for news, and best Legal AF best news podcast. We're in first place among the 5 finalists, but your vote, that's the beauty. Your vote is what matters. That's why this is the award of all the awards that we want to win. And we do appreciate you. Legal AF YouTube channel, 12 videos or so every day. Legal AF Substack, where you can also become part of this community. And thanks for supporting The Intersection in every way. You know, we're regularly in the top 50 to 100, whatever, for YouTube podcasts. And we do appreciate all that you do here. So shout out to the Midas Mighty and the Legal AFers and the Intersectionists. Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.